they're a little bit more well-rounded as far as their ability to communicate. If you ask me, putting them in the school setting for their entire childhood is not normal.
Probably the parents' main concern when it comes to
Mhm.
homeschool is socialization, right? So let's maybe discuss that for a little bit because people are like, oh, you're homeschooling your kids. Like, how are they going to interact with other kids? Are they going to make friends? These sort of things. I read your whole blog article on it and it was fascinating. How do your kids socialize?
Believe it or not, they leave the house. They're not locked up in the house for months at a time. It's weird because I think that's what people really believe, that they never get to leave and go anywhere, and it's laughable because often we're so busy that I'm exhausted from going here and there and all the activities. So, just to be clear, homeschool kids do leave their house. They do talk to people, they have friends. Where I live, it's a pretty small rural area. I think our county has maybe 25,000 population. It's not big. Anyway, but we have a really large homeschool community. And so our homeschoolers get together and do things, and we go to church. As soon as the kids are old enough to get a part-time job, they do. So they go work in the public eye. They work with strangers, and but not being at school doesn't keep them from knowing how to talk to other humans. It's just a normal thing. Humans are social people. And so, apart from the very, very shy kid, everyone talks to people. They see the trash truck driver and they wave when they're little, and they say hi to the Amazon delivery person or the mailman or the grocery store cashier. It's just normal for humans to communicate. If you look at little kids who've never been to school, my grandson is 3. He talks to people. He's never been to school to be trained to talk to people. He just knows that's what you do. So if people just, it's like they don't think anymore. They just follow some scripted rehearsal of certain questions that you have to ask homeschoolers. And so my kids socialize by going to church, we have homeschool cooperatives where a lot of families get together and certain parents will teach classes on all kinds of things. And so they get to interact with other kids, but also do cool stuff. My kids have done dance and theater and sports and, oh my goodness, everything all the other kids do. We just don't go do it at the public school. That's really the only difference. We just do it in a different building or a different park or whatever. And then, of course, they spend their day with parents, which means adults. And so they have that ability to more to adults and talk more like adults and interact with adults. Homeschooled kids may get to see more of their grandparents, depending on the situation, the neighbors. And so instead of just being in this bubble of kids, they are interacting with whoever they come across on any given day. And so I think that, like you said, when you run into homeschoolers, you often feel like you're not talking to a kid because they don't spend all their life with kids, and so they don't just act like kids. They're a little bit more well-rounded as far as their ability to communicate and just be in a room with other people. They're able to, in most cases, look you in the eye and have a complete conversation and use full sentences and listen and respond and things like that. And so it's not necessarily just about signing them up for a sport and then a dance class and then whatever else. It's just living normal life. And if you ask me, putting them in the school setting for their entire childhood is not normal. What we're doing is normal. It's just normal life and interacting with whoever we come across on any given day.
So if I play devil's advocate a little bit here, like I'm thinking back to when I was at school and I loved school. So but it was also very different back then, I think. And I used to spend a lot of time with my friends and love that part of socializing. But I do think that school has actually changed a lot over the years. And I think that technology has been I think it's been a net positive, but for kids having phones is definitely a net negative. And the problem is the socializing part is not actually done in a normal way anymore. Kids communicate to each other using their phones, and that is not a healthy way. The fact that they do it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. We still
Yeah.
need to learn to talk to each other. We still need to have that connection, that bond as a human. Like our DNA hasn't changed. The way we're doing things has changed, but it's not a healthy way to do things. So I think at school, the socializing is not even socializing these days how we would maybe even want our kids to experience it.
Yeah, even if you say, "Okay, I understand cell phones are not healthy for my kids," If you send them to school, they're surrounded by kids who do have unlimited use of cell phones, and by that, the internet. Unlimited access to the internet, and even if your kids don't have it, they're going to be influenced by it because of all the other kids, and so, to me, that's something that I don't think enough people are thinking about. When you say, "Oh, my kids get socialization, but they don't have the internet." Oh, yes, they do. They don't have to have their own little device to be influenced by it, and in a horrendous way sometimes. And the nice thing about in the homeschooling community, all of the homeschool kids, I know I'd say about 80-90% of them have cell phones too. But you can talk to parents and say, so what are you doing about limits, or what kind of protection do you have on your kids, or do they have access to YouTube whenever they want? You can talk to the parents and find out, okay, what kids are being more protected and which kids have unlimited access. Okay, so I'm going to find some like-minded parents, and we're going to let our kids hang out together because at least I understand that these parents think the same way I do about internet access. That's a huge deal. And then if maybe they want to join an activity where there are lots of kids with phones, you go there and hang out too, because that's what homeschool families do. Instead of sending them on a bus somewhere with one or two adults that you may or may not know, or into a classroom all day long at lunch and in the gym and all those things, you have no access and you have no control over what's being talked about and what music they're listening to, what videos all those other kids have seen. It's almost like when people say, "What about socialization?" I want to go, yeah, what about that anyway? Because what you guys are doing is not healthy. And so we are going out there and being very careful and selective about friendships and about social events. I'm trying to protect my kids from so much socialization and be proactive and be very specific about where they're spending their time. And so, of course, my kids have friends. Kids come to our house, we go hang out and do a lot of activities, but we get to be selective about where they're spending their time and who it's with and what they're being exposed to. So, there's a lot of different ways to look at the socialization issue now.
For sure. I always think an important way to flip things on people is to just ask them the question back. Like you said, so what about socialization? Tell me about your kid. And then they can answer you and you dig a little deeper and you go, okay, so tell me about this. And almost get them to get their wires working and
Yeah.
connecting and having a think about what they're actually asking and saying. One of the things that you've also written a lot about is bullying. And one of the calls that you get the most from other parents is like, how do I homeschool because my kid is getting bullied or there's something else going on at school? And I think we also underestimate that quite a lot too. And what I've heard in schools in America is even like things like drugs are becoming a problem, which is crazy. I couldn't believe it when some of my friends told me that in America.
Yeah, and apparently we've been fighting this drug campaign for such a long time. It's not working. I have a lot of calls from parents or grandparents over the years who their child is lead to the being suicidal, and they just, I've got to get them out, and I absolutely get them out. That is my first piece of to any parent whose child is in position, because the they don't need to be under that kind of influence, need to be treated in several way that they think that they should take their own life. If that is even an issue, get them out of the situation. Don't even worry about school right now. Worry about their life. That's what I just think. These parents who say, I've been talking to the principal and I've talked to the teacher, and I just go, just take them home. This is not that hard. Take them home. Quit your job, whatever you have to do. Why is this so hard? But for those, I always say, just stop the public schools, stop it in the middle of the year, whatever you have to do. Bring your child home and let them heal. And don't start school right away. You don't have to get a curriculum in place for the very next Monday. Your child has been through trauma and they need to heal. They need to sleep and they need to stay home with you, and they need to be counseled with some professional help, and they need to be able to just reset and start all over again. And so I in the homeschooling community, we call it deschooling, which is basically just letting go of all of that. If it takes 2 weeks or 2 months, just letting your child just de-stress and start all over again. And you say, okay, you're in that atmosphere anymore. You're not in that school. We're going to find a different method of education. And because of the explosion in homeschooling, there's so many ways to get an education at home.